we are going to start talking about our personality theories. Say hello to our guest lecturer, Rory, today. But we're going to start talking about our personality theories starting with the earliest, and that was our psychoanalytical theory. This is Freud. This is where it's going to start getting a little weird, okay? Because Freud was a little bit of a weirdo. He was a neurologist, and what he noticed was that he had some patients who were suffering from nervous disorders that didn't really have any physical causes, right? So he referred to this as hysteria. Basically, there's some sort of underlying psychological cause for this nervous disorder that this person was experiencing. And from this, Freud developed our first personality theory ever. And how he did this is he used a process called free association. And what free association is that he asked patients to say whatever came to their mind to tap into the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind was the reservoir of unacceptable thoughts, wishes, feelings, or memories that we really don't have access to. And how free association worked is he would just allow patients to say whatever came to their mind, and then those chain of thoughts led to painful or embarrassing unconscious memories. And once these memories were retrieved and released, meaning the patients talked about them, then the patient felt better. And this was the process of psychoanalysis. Okay, so let's do a short example. So when I say the word, when I put it up on the screen, pause the video and just write down anything that comes to your mind when I put the word up, okay? Banana. Pause, write down what you think. Okay, so what did you write down? You might have wrote down fruit, yellow, monkeys, Johnny Bananas from the challenge on MTV. What Freud would do is he would continue to ask about where are these thoughts taking you, right? And it wouldn't just be your thoughts based on the word banana. Now you wrote down Johnny Bananas. What are you going to write down that comes from that? Okay, so where do these thoughts lead you, and why are they leading you there? So let's talk about the different parts of the mind that Freud came up with. What Freud said is that the mind is like an iceberg. We can only see part of the mind. That is our conscious mind. That is what we are currently aware of. That is what is currently in our mind, in our thoughts right now. So probably what we're talking about right now, Freud, this iceberg, the unconscious. Maybe you're daydreaming. Maybe you're looking at Rory. The next part is the preconscious. This is the info that's not necessarily in our conscious thought, but we can retrieve this as necessary. These are the facts, the things that you know, our memories that we can bring up. We're not currently thinking about them, but we can retrieve them if we need them. And then finally is our unconscious. This is our out of awareness. We cannot retrieve this information. However, it can dictate our behavior. And Freud put this like an iceberg. Notice, only the tip of the iceberg can be seen above the water, right? This is our conscious mind. The part that is just under the surface, we can also see, but we can't see the massive bottom of the iceberg. This is our unconscious. Ask Captain Smith from the Titanic. You can't always see what's below the surface, right? So that's the idea that Freud came up with. We have our conscious that we can see readily, that's readily available, our preconscious, which is kind of, easy to retrieve, and then our unconscious, which we cannot see. So how do these unconscious thoughts or memories influence our behavior? Well, Freud came up with two different ways. The first was our latent content of our dreams. What Freud did is he looked at the symbolic meaning of the images within our dreams. And so what he would say is, oh, that boulder is chasing you. Maybe that boulder is because you really wanted to be with your mom, and now it's chasing you because you can't run away from that. Okay, so a lot of the images that he came up with had these like underlying sexual meanings, but that's what Freud came up with, the underlying meaning of the actual images in your dreams. He also said that our unconscious came out in our Freudian slips. These were slips of the tongue that were actually our unconscious thoughts surfacing. For example, if you're in biology class and you're trying to say the word organism, but instead of organism, you say orgasm. That would be a Freudian slip. Freud would say, oh, well, you're actually thinking about sex right now. Okay, so let's talk about the different parts of personality that Freud came up with. There's 3 of them: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is our unconscious drives. This is the pleasure principle. This is the little devil on your shoulder that is telling you what exactly you want to do. It's the aggressive sexual drives that you have. Immediate gratification. So when you get in a fight, this is the part of you that's like, oh, I just want to punch that person right now. Okay? Then we have the superego, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum. This is our standard for judgment. This is the moral principle. I really want to punch that person, but I know I'll get in trouble, or I know it's not right. That's the superego. Okay? Then we have the ego, which is in the middle. This is our conscious executive. This is our part of the personality that's kind of deciding between the id and the superego, the reality principle. I really want to punch that person. Oh my gosh, it's really not right for me to punch people. Peace and love. You know what? I'm just going to curse this person out. I'll be fine. That's the reality principle, okay? I am probably dating myself, but I think about it in terms of this Full House episode with Michelle when she's deciding to do something and she has her little angel and devil selves come into the picture, right? The one in the pink is her little angel self. This would be the super ego, right? The moral judgments. The id is our pleasure principle, the bad stuff you want to do. That's the biker chick, Michelle. And then the Michelle in the denim jumper, that's our ego, deciding what they're going to follow. The id or the superego. Okay, so how do we develop personality? Well, Freud believed that personality formed in our first few years of our life. And he put these first few years into our psychosexual stages. This is where it gets weird, people. I'm just warning you. During these stages, the id's pleasure principle, so the parts of our body or the parts of our mind that derive pleasure, are focused on a particular sensitive body area. These are called our erogenous zones, okay? The first stage that Freud came up with was the oral stage. This is birth to 1 year, okay? So this is Rory, right? She's obtaining pleasure from the mouth, anything that goes in our mouth, right? So don't think of these words in terms of like kinky sexual terms, okay? Think of these as like parts of the body in which you're dealing with things. At this stage, what is Rory dealing with? She's eating, right? So in order to soothe her, she's sucking, maybe on a pacifier, on a bottle, she's swallowing. Those are the things that give her pleasure at this point to calm her down. The second stage is the anal stage. That's 1 to 3 years old. And this is when children are going to be focusing on potty training, right? They're going to get pleasure from learning how to control their bodily functions. So I can control when I go to the bathroom and where I go to the bathroom. How exciting. The next stage is our phallic stage. This is by far the weirdest. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out there. Freud believed this was the most crucial stage. If you don't know what the word phallic means, on your own time, not on a school computer, Google it. Okay, but the most crucial stage, according to Freud, and basically what Freud said is that this is when children start to be curious about their genitalia and how they're going to deal with these incestuous feelings that they're having. And these incestuous feelings that he came up with was the Oedipus complex. And basically what this was, and Freud focused on boys, was that boys have this unconscious desire to be with their mom. And because of this desire, they become jealous or hate their dad. And they're worried that their dad is going to find out about these feelings and punish them. And the punishment would be castration. Okay. Later on, Karen Horney and Freud's daughter Anna decided, hey, what about women? So they came up with the Electra complex, which is the same thing for women except little girls. So the same thing as the Oedipus complex except for little girls, and opposite. What Freud said is that if children are going to cope with these incestuous feelings, then they're going to repress those feelings of desire towards their opposite sex parent, okay? And they're going to say, okay, I can't have my mom, so I better be like my dad, so eventually I can find someone like my mom, okay? So through the process of identifying their superego they're going to start incorporating their parents' values into their personality. That's the idea here at the phallic stage. The other part of this, the actual like physical part of this, is that children during this stage, ages 3 to 5, actually are kind of obsessed with their genitals, right? It's not necessarily that they're trying to find sexual pleasure from their genitals. They're just like curious about what it is. And they might ask to see other little kids' genitals and touch themselves. And again, not in a sexual way, but just out of curiosity. Okay, the next stage is the latent stage. This is ages 5 to 12. I call this the cootie stage. This is when kids really aren't dealing with the opposite sex. They're just playing with their friends of the same sex. Okay, they're not really focused on any sexual interest or being with anyone in any sort of relationship. They just want to play. And then finally, the genital stage. This is ages 12 and up. This is adult sexuality. This is when children are starting to find pleasure in sexual feelings towards other people. Okay, so let's talk about fixation. Fixation is the idea that we can become stuck in a particular stage, not necessarily that we won't mentally develop past that stage, but the idea that we're going to somehow fixate on the pleasure that we receive from that stage. And this is if a traumatic event occurs during that time. So oral fixation. If a child does not receive the pleasure that they need during that oral stage, so if they're malnourished, if they don't receive any sort of soothing from a pacifier or anything like that, now they can become fixated in that oral stage. It could lead to excessive oral contact through smoking, drinking, eating. The person can become dependent on other people, sarcastic, or try and act tough. Anal fixation, if a child struggles through that potty training stage, then they become anal retentive or anal expulsive. And this is, anal retentive is very controlled or orderly, excuse her. And anal expulsive would be they're messy or disorganized. Okay, let's talk about the defense mechanisms. So basically what Freud came up with was methods, bless you, methods for our ego to protect itself against the anxiety that we have from this conflict between the id and the superego. So it's our body's way of kind of like protecting itself from this struggle between the two sides of the coin. This only becomes unhealthy when they cause self-defeating behaviors and emotional problems. So the defense mechanisms that Freud came up with, the first is repression. Repression underlines all of the other defense mechanisms. It can be like the only one that happens and the other ones like don't have anything to do with it. And basically this is the idea that we avoid painful thoughts by forcing them into our unconscious. For example, if we witness a murder, we might repress those thoughts by not being able to remember any sort of details when the police ask us for them. The next one is regression. This is where we retreat to behaving or thinking like a child in order to avoid adult issues. I know I do this sometimes when you don't get what you want or you're really, really hungry, you might throw a temper tantrum, right? We call that being hangry. And that's regression. The next is displacement. This is diverting our sexual or aggressive impulses to a more acceptable person or object. So if you're really, really angry at your mom, instead of taking it out on your mom, you're going to take it out on your dog by yelling at your dog, okay? This often happens. We do this a lot with people that we really love, right? We don't want to take it out of them, so we go and yell into our pillow. The next is projection. This is disguising our threatening impulses by attributing them to others. So for example, if you want to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, instead of just doing it, you're going to avoid it by accusing him or her of wanting to break up with you instead. The next is sublimation. Sublimation is we expend energy on pro-social activities in order to avoid undesirable activities. The idea is that you're really aggressive, you like to hit things, so instead of hitting people, you're going to take up boxing as a hobby. Okay, we will finish these defense mechanisms in part 2.